Hello everybody, and welcome to Monster Mondays, episode 24, Disney Creepypastas. I know it's been a long time since the last episode, and I don't recall if I said we would have a guest or not the last time. If I did, I'm sorry to say we tried doing the episode, but in the end we mutually agreed not to air it for personal reasons that I will not mention here out of respect for the confidentiality and wishes of the would-be participants of the show. In consolation, here are the stories I picked out for this episode, as I kind of wanted to do a family-friendly horror theme for it, and what better theme than Disneyland creepypastas? For our first story, we're going to do my personal favorite, and one that I frequently listen to in bed at night. It's called The Disney Mirror Ritual. And here it goes. Have you ever heard of the Disney Mirror Ritual? Don't be fooled by its name or its location. The happiest place on earth. It's a fairly dangerous ritual with a high chance of getting caught. Granted, the payoff is fairly high. It is not known why or how this ritual came to be at Disney World. It is said that each of the Disney parks has its own unique ritual with the same consequences for failure. But the one at Disney World seems to have the most known information. This is a mirror ritual. Mirror mythology is well invoked in Disney stories. Think Beauty and the Beast, Snow White, 1 Hour in Wonderland, and such. I'm sure you might think a ritual would take place at the Haunted Mansion or one of the spookier rides, but you'd be wrong. The main part of the ritual takes place in Cinderella's castle, roughly the epicenter of Magic Kingdom. The night part of the ritual must take place between 2 and 4 a.m. To complete this ritual, you'll need 3 items. 1. A piece of chalk. 2. A knife that has had its handle broken off. In other words, only the blade. The type of knife does not matter, but as you will have to sneak this past security, you might want a smaller blade you can conceal in your shoe or other hiding place. 3. A broken shard of mirror, roughly the size of your palm. You might want to find a pre-broken shard if you believe in the superstition of 7 years bad luck. The ritual begins during the daytime hours of the Magic Kingdom section of Disney World. During the day, you must hide 3 items in separate areas of the park. The areas to choose from are Main Street, USA, Liberty Square, Fantasyland, Adventureland, Frontierland, and Tomorrowland. Study the map of the park and decide what routes would be easiest to travel undetected. Don't pick distances you can't manage. Keep in mind that the area around Cinderella's castle will be the most heavily patrolled by security. While there are security cameras in the park, don't worry about them. Something about the ritual makes them seem to malfunction. Before hiding the items, head to the tunnel going through Cinderella's castle. Be careful here, there are some Disney staff that are aware of the ritual and know to keep an eye for those attempting it. Hide the chalk in your hand. Pick out a brick you're able to reach at face level. And when you're absolutely sure no one is watching you, critical tip, you might want a friend to make a distraction or ask any immediate staff questions to get their attention. Mark the corner of the brick with chalk. Say the words mirror, mirror, then leave. This will tell the park you intend to play. You will use this brick during the ritual. Then find hiding places for items. At this point, you've completed the daytime part of the ritual. Use the remainder of the time as you will until the park closes, but make sure you find a place you can remain hidden once the park closes for the night. It's not easy, but it's been done. If you decide not to go through with the ritual, retrieve the items, erase the chalk mark, and leave the park. You can only cancel the ritual during the daytime hours. Do not attempt the ritual ever again. Do not emerge from your hiding place right after the park closes. It'll be full of maintenance workers and patrolling security. Wait until at least an hour after the park closes. But remember, you need to be done before 4 a.m. Security presence will be smaller at the hour, but by no means gone. Watch for the roving security guards as you make your way to the items. Retrieve the mirror shard last, or you will trigger the more dangerous part of the ritual early. If you reach any of your hiding places and the item is gone, run. The park does not accept your challenge. You'll need to reach the entrance and get out, or even get yourself busted by security, which would be a much preferable fate. Once you retrieve the mirror shard, You'll begin the second most dangerous phase of the ritual. Security patrols are no longer your concern. They will have mysteriously disappeared or gone dark. You may see a flashlight beam way off in the distance, but they will not come close to you. Some chalk this up to magic, others theorize that completing the steps until this point triggers a parallel dimension of sorts within the park. Regardless of the cause, you have a new concern. Make haste and head towards Cinderella's castle, but once again, try to stay out of sight. Use the mirror shard to look around corners and behind you, and keep the broken blade in your dominant hand. You're on the lookout for figures that have been dubbed the False. The False take the form of Disney mascots you might see during the daytime. Don't be fooled. The paid Disney mascots went home hours ago. It's not exactly hard to tell the difference. Suits worn by these figures will appear filthy, matted, and generally tattered. You'll most likely find them lurking around corners, which is why you want to use the mirror first. If you see one of the False in your mirror, take your blade lightly between your fingers and drag it across the reflection of the mirror with the point. This will prompt the figure to move away. However, odds are you will have at least one encounter with a False face to face. They're capable of appearing at will. If you're on a street or a bridge with no turns, should you see a False at any point, not as a mirror reflection, shut your eyes immediately and gently place the mirror shard at your feet, but keep hold of the blade. Remain still with your eyes shut and listen for footsteps and rattling breath. The False will be moving slowly towards you. It will stop at arm's length in front of you and reach. The only chance for escape is to estimate when it's reaching for you. Then reach out and jab the figure itself with your blade. Do not miss. You won't get a second chance. Miss and you fail the ritual. Consequences of failure are discussed later. If your aim is true, the False will hiss in pain and begin moving away. When the footsteps are no longer audible, you can open your eyes, retrieve your mirror, and continue on your path. Critical tip: your blade will become weaker each time a face-to-face encounter occurs. If your blade breaks, you'll be defenseless. The False will know. Keep face-to-face encounters to a minimum. Should you successfully arrive at Cinderella's castle, you'll be safe. Find the brick you marked. Take your mirror and hold it to the brick. Trace a chalk outline around the shard. When you pull your hand away, the shard will remain on the surface. Step back and turn around 3 times clockwise. With each turn, say the words mirror, mirror for a total of 3 times. Upon completing the 3rd turn, you will face the wall only to see that the surface area of the brick has become that of a mirror. Look into the mirror and you'll see a faint outline of a clouded face. Here's where the goal of the ritual comes into play. Make sure you choose the question beforehand. The face will slowly say, past, present, future. To choose, nod your head if the mirror says you want the one you want. If you nod for past, the mirror will show you an answer to a question regarding the past. It can range from a personal mystery from your own past to a historical mystery such as who killed JFK. For present, you can be asked to show the solution to a problem currently plaguing you or an issue the world currently faces. Future, needless to say, will show you a future outcome yet to pass. Ask the mirror your question and watch your long-awaited answer. Once you have your answer, step away from the mirror again. Turn around 3 times, now in counterclockwise direction again. With each turn, say the words mirror, mirror for a total of 3 times. Upon completing the 3rd turn, the mirror will be gone and so will the shard. The castle has taken it as tribute. Leave the castle and head back to your hiding place. On your way, drop the blade into the moat surrounding the castle. Keep a hold of the chalk. You need not worry about being caught by security or any False at this point. The park respects your accomplishment and will allow you temporary safe passage safely. However, do not take this gesture as an excuse to linger or explore. This will be taken as arrogance or an insult, and your protection will be revoked. Simply head back to your initial hiding spot as quickly as you can. When you return to the hiding place, draw a circle of chalk around you. Find a location with a door, draw a half circle around the door on the floor. Remain hidden until morning, when the park opens and the visitors have been let back in. Critical tip: do not fall asleep. Do not respond to any voices or footsteps you may hear, no matter how close the sound gets to you. If you're hiding in a place with a door, do not react to knocks, no matter how frantic they become. You'll remain safe if you stay awake and quiet. Most important of all, do not follow along if you hear a Disney song being played. This includes singing, humming, or even following the song in your mind. Cover your ears with your hands and do not let the song get stuck in your head. The following day, once you know visitors have begun entering the park, leave your hiding spot and immediately head for the exit of the park. Do not stop to do anything, just leave. Drop the chalk at the entrance, and once you've left, never return to Disney World ever. The park knows you and your welcome is worn out. Now, the part that is yet to be discussed is what happens if you fail the ritual. Should you be caught by the false during an item retrieval, linger too long outside your hiding place after completing the night ritual, or answer to voices knocking before morning. Should one of the false place their hand on you, you will lose the ability to move freely. If you return to the park after successful completion of the ritual, you encounter a false that no one else will appear to see. In any case, they will slowly lead you to the entrance of the park. You can walk away then, but no matter where you go or what you do during the night, the next day you will find yourself at the entrance of the park once again. Only, you will once again have no control over your actions. As if in a hypnotic trance, you will move toward your fate. Perhaps you'll find yourself on a ride with non-functioning seat restraints only to be thrown out into the tracks. Walking on the above-ground monorail tracks with an incoming train behind you. On a riverboat that flips into waters not made for swimming. In the path of an oncoming parade float. Whatever fate the happiest place on earth has for you, rest assured it will not involve a happily ever after. Final thoughts? It's good. I'm unsure how I would score it numerically, but it has just the right amount of believability that someone who works the place or has connections to those that do could theoretically pull something like this off, even if nothing came out of it in actuality. Some rituals are so ridiculous in their presentation, like, as much as I like the suspense factor of the staircase ritual where you try to rid your home of what haunts it by spending an hour on each step standing there, no bathroom breaks, no climbing down the stairs, no turning around. There's just too many things a person would die trying to repeat or ruin their home in the case of pissing on the stairs. And for what? To prove whether or not the ritual is fake or real? Yeah, I worked a job where I stood or walked for up to 8 hours a day, but even I had to take breaks to eat and could not bear the idea of doing it for a full 24 hours. 16 is the longest I've ever worked straight and still had the breaks involved, and it was insane. But I digress. It's at least something someone could copy the steps to take the challenge, provided they had the right permissions or knew the layout as well as a worker to know the blind spots, and that's the cool part of it. In short, it gets the Forsaken seal of approval for being an enjoyable re-listen on my playlist, and also some commentary to note is, I think the hardest part of this ritual, if not the most impossible part, would have to be keeping the Disney songs that are so viral out of your head the whole time, especially if the music is constantly playing even when nobody's around, as was often the case when I worked at Carl's Jr. and the radio would go on, our in-store radio would go on all night long, because it was just like a disc that we'd put in, and we never bothered to turn it off most nights. Now for a second story. This is another favorite which is often criticized for its lack of fear factor. But I have to say, at least it succeeds in being amusing. Perhaps this could make an interesting mystery novel if it's fleshed out more. No pun intended, as you'll see. Some of you may have heard that the Disney Corporation is responsible for at least one real-life ghost town. Disney built the Treasure Island Resort in Baker's Bay in the Bahamas. It didn't start as a ghost town. Disney's cruise ships would actually stop at the resort and leave tourists there to relax in luxury. This is a fact. Look it up. Disney blew $30 million on the place. Yes, $30 million. Then they abandoned it. Disney blamed the shallow waters, too shallow for the ships to safely operate. There was even blame cast on the workers, saying that since they were from the Bahamas, they were too lazy to work a regular schedule. That is where the factual nature of the story ends. It wasn't because of sand, it wasn't because foreigners are lazy. Both are convenient excuses. No, I sincerely doubt these reasons were legitimate. Why don't I buy the official story? Because of Mowgli's Palace. Near the beachside city of Emerald Isle in North Carolina, Disney began construction on the Mowgli's Palace in the late 1990s. The concept was a jungle-themed resort with a large, you guessed it, palace in the center of the whole thing. If you're unfamiliar with the character of Mowgli, then you might better remember the story of the Jungle Book. If you haven't seen it anywhere else, you'd know it as the Disney cartoon from decades past. Mowgli is an abandoned child in the jungle, essentially raised by animals and simultaneously threatened and pursued by other animals. Mowgli's Palace was a controversial undertaking from the start. Disney bought up a ton of high-priced land for the project, and there was actually a scandal surrounding some of the purchases. The local government claimed eminent domain on people's homes and then turned around and sold the properties to Disney. At one point, a home that had just been constructed was immediately condemned with little to no explanation. The land grabbed by the government was supposedly some fictional highway project. Knowing full well what was going on, people started calling it Mickey Mouse Highway. Then there was the concept art. A group of stuffed shirts from Disney Co. actually held a city meeting. They intended to sell everyone on how lucrative this project was going to be for everyone. They showed the concept art, this gigantic Indian palace surrounded by jungle, staffed with men and women in loincloths and tribal gear. Well, suffice to say, everyone flipped their shit. We're talking about a large Indian palace, jungle, and loincloths, not only in the center of a relatively wealthy area, but also a somewhat xenophobic area of the southern USA. It was a questionable mix at that point in history. One member of the crowd tried to storm the stage, but he was quickly subdued by security after he managed to break one of the presentation boards over his knee. Disney took that community and essentially broke it over its knee as well. The houses were razed, the land was cleared, and there wasn't a damned thing anyone could do or say about it. Local TV and newspapers were against the resort at the beginning, but some insane connection between Disney's media holdings and the local venues came into play, and their opinions turned on a dime. So anyway, Treasure Island, the Bahamas, Disney sunk millions and then split. The same thing happened with Mowgli's Palace. Construction was complete, visitors actually stayed at the resort. Surrounding communities were flooded with traffic and the usual annoyances associated with an influx of lost and irate tourists. Then it all just stopped. Disney shut it down and nobody knew what the hell to think. They were pretty happy about it. Disney's loss was pretty hilarious and wonderful to a large group of folks who didn't want it in the first place. Honestly, I didn't give the other place another thought since hearing it closed over a decade ago. I live maybe 4 hours from Emerald Isle, so really, I only heard the rumblings and didn't experience any of it firsthand. Then I read this article from someone who had explored the Treasure Island Resort and posted a whole blog about all the crazy shit he found there. Stuff just left behind. Things smashed, defaced, probably ruined by the disgruntled former employees who lost their jobs. Hell, the locals from all around probably had a hand in wrecking that place. People that just felt angry about Treasure Island. As folks did hear about Mowgli's Palace. Plus, there were rumors that Disney had released their aquarium stock into the local waters when they closed, including sharks. Who wouldn't want to take a few swings at some merchandise after that? Well, what I'm getting at is that this blog about Treasure Island got me thinking. Even though many years had passed since its closing, I figured it might be cool to do some urban exploration at Mowgli's Palace, take some photos, write about my experience, and probably see if there's anything I could take home as a memento. I'm not going to say I wasted no time in getting there, because honestly it took me another year after I first found that Treasure Island article to get around to going up there. Over the course of that year, I did a lot of research on the Palace Resort, or rather I tried to. Naturally, no official Disney site or resource made any mention of the place. It had been scrubbed clean. Even odder, however, was no one before myself had apparently thought to blog about this place, or even post a photo. None of the local TV or newspaper sites had one word about the place. Though that was to be expected since they had all swung Disney's way. They wouldn't be out there lauding their embarrassment, you know. Recently, I learned that corporations can actually ask Google, for example, to remove links from search results, basically for no good reason. looking back, it's probably not that anyone spoke of the resort, but rather the words were made inaccessible. So in the end, I could barely find the place. All I had to go on was an old-as-hell map I'd received in the mail back in the 90s. It was a promotional item sent to people who had recently been to Disney World. And I guess since I'd been there in the late 80s, that was recent. I didn't really tend to hang on to it. It just got shoved in with my books and comics from childhood. I only remembered it months into my research, and even then it took another few weeks to locate the storage bin my parents had shoved it all into. But I did find it. Locals were no help, as most were transplants who'd moved to the beach in recent years, or old residents who just sneered at me and made rude gestures the second I managed to say, "Where would I find Mowgli's?" The drive took me through an inordinately large corridor of overgrowth. Tropical plants that had run rampant and overpopulated the area mixed with the native species of flora that actually belonged there and tried to reclaim the land. I was in awe when I reached the front gates of the resort. Tremendous monolithic wooden gates whose supports to either side looked like they must have been cut from giant sequoias. The gate itself had been gouged in several places by woodpeckers and eaten away at the base by burrowing insects. Hanging onto the gate was a sheet of metal, some random scrap with a hand painted letter scrawled in back, "Abandoned by Disney." Clearly the handiwork of some past or local employee wanted to make a small protest. Gates were open enough to walk through but not drive, so grabbing my digital camera and the map whose flip side showed the layout of the resort, I set off on foot. The inner grounds of the place were just as overgrown as the entryway. Palm trees stood untended and ragged among piles of their own coconuts. Banana plants similarly stood in their own stinking, bug-riddled refuse. There was a sort of clash between order and chaos. Its carefully planted rows of perennial flowers mixed with obnoxious tall weeds and stinking black mushrooms. All that remained of any outdoor structures were broken. Rotting wood, various charred bits of unidentifiable material. What was most likely an information booth or an outdoor bar was now simply a pile of assorted debris, chopped up by past vandalism and ravaged by weather. The most interesting thing on the grounds was a statue of Baloo, the friendly bear from Jungle Book, which stood in a sort of courtyard in front of the main building. It was frozen in a jovial wave toward no one, staring into an empty space with a silly toothy grin as bird shit covered whole swaths of his fur. The vines ensnared his platform. I approached the main building, the palace, only to find the outside of the building covered in graffiti, where the original paint hadn't been peeled and chipped away. The front doors weren't just open, they'd been taken off their hinges and were stolen. Above the front doors, or the gaping maw where they'd been, someone had once again painted, "Abandoned by Disney." I wish I could tell you about all the awesome stuff I saw inside the palace. Forgotten statues, abandoned cash registers, a full-fledged secret society of homeless bums, but no. The inside of the building was so stark, so bare, that I actually think people had stolen the molding off the walls. Anything that was too big to steal, counters, desks, giant fake trees, they were all resting amid this empty echo chamber that amplified my every step, like a slow rat-a-tat of a machine gun. I checked the floor plan and headed to all the locations that might seem in any way interesting. The kitchen was, as you'd imagine, an industrial food prep area, with all the appliances and space no expenses spared. Every glass surface was broken, every door knocked off its hinges, every metal surface kicked and dented. The entire palace smelled like very old piss. The huge freezer, not even remotely cool now, had row upon row of empty shelf space. Hooks hung from the ceiling, probably for hanging cuts of meat. And as I stood inside for a moment, I noticed they were swinging. Each hook swung in a random direction, but their movements were so slow and small that it was almost impossible to see. I figured it had been caused by my footsteps, so I stopped one from swinging by clutching it in my fist, then carefully letting go. But within seconds, it started to swing once more. The bathrooms were in much the same state as the rest of the place. Just like the Treasure Island Resort, someone had methodically smashed every porcelain commode with coconuts, and other implements. There was about half an inch of rancid, stinking, stagnant water on the floor, so I didn't stay there very long. What's odd is that the toilets and the sinks and the bidets in the ladies' room, yes, I went there, all dripped, leaked, or ran freely. Seems to me they should have shut the water off long ago. And yeah, I know that's pronounced bidets, but that's kind of one of my quirks. I'll sometimes, pronounce things exactly as they're spelled, especially French ones, because, I don't know, I really hate how nothing is spelled like it sounds to me, at least in English. There were plenty of rooms in the resort, but naturally I didn't have time to look through them all. The few I did peer into were similarly wrecked, and I didn't expect to find anything there. I thought there was actually a television or radio in one room, as I really think I heard a quiet conversation coming out, though it was more like a whisper, maybe my own breathing echoing in the silence, or just another case of the sound of flowing water playing tricks on my mind. This is what it sounded like. I didn't believe it. Some short unknown reply. I didn't know that. Your father told you. Unknown reply, or possibly just weeping. I know, that sounds ridiculous, but I'm just telling you what I experienced. I thought there might have been something running in that room, or worse, some vagrants who'd hold up in there and probably would have knifed me. At the front doors of the palace again, I figured I hadn't found anything of note and had wasted the trip up. As I looked out the door, I noticed something interesting in the courtyard that I'd apparently missed. Something that would give me at least one thing to show for all my trouble, even if it was just a photograph. There was a lifelike statue of a python, maybe 80 feet long, coiled up and sunning itself on a pedestal right in the center of the area. It was almost time for the sun to start setting, so the light fell upon the object in the perfect way for a photograph. I approached the python and snapped a photo, then I stood on my toes and snapped another. I moved closer again to get the detail on its face. Slowly, casually, the python lifted its head and looked directly into my eyes, turned and slithered off the pedestal across the gates and into the trees, all 80 feet of it. Its head long disappeared into the woods before its tail even left the sunning spot. Disney had released all their exotic animals onto the grounds. Right there on my floor plan map was the reptile house. I should have known. I read about the sharks at Treasure Island, and I should have known they'd done this. I was dumbfounded, just utterly stupefied. My mouth must have been hanging open for the longest time before I came down to earth and it snapped shut. I blinked a few times and backed away from where the snake had been, back toward the palace. Even though it was totally gone, I still wasn't taking any chances and backed my way into the building. I took a few deep breaths and slaps to my own face to get it right again after that. I looked for a place to sit down as my legs were feeling a bit like jelly at this point. Of course there was no place to sit down unless I wanted to recline in broken glass and dead leaf carpet or haul myself up to a desk of questionable reliability. I had seen some stairs near the palace's lobby and decided to go have a seat there until I felt better. The staircase was far away from the front of the building to be relatively clean, save for the startling accumulation of dust. I pulled a wedge of metal off the wall, once again painted with the abandoned by Disney motto I'd become accustomed to. I placed the wedge on the stairs and sat on it to keep it at least somewhat clean. The stairs led downward, below ground level. Using my camera flash as a sort of improvised flashlight, I could see that the staircase ended in a metal mesh door with a padlock. A sign on the door, a real sign, read, "Mascots only, thank you." This perked up my spirits a little bit for two reasons. One, a mascots only area would have definitely had some interesting stuff back in the day. Two, the padlock was still in place. Nobody had gone down there. Not the vandals, not the looters, nobody. This was the one place I could actually explore and perhaps find something interesting to photograph or wantonly steal. I'd come to the palace essentially agreeing with myself that it was okay to take anything I wanted because, hey, abandoned. It didn't take much to bust the lock. Well, actually, that's wrong. It didn't take much to bust the metal plate on the wall the padlock was hooked to. Time and decay had done most of the work for me. I was able to bend the metal plate enough to pull the screws out of the wall, something no one else had apparently thought of or hadn't been able to do at the time. Mascots Only area was a startling and very welcoming change of pace from the rest of the building I'd seen. For one, every second or third fluorescent light overhead was illuminated, even though they'd flickered and faded randomly. Also, nothing had been broken or stolen, even if age and exposure were definitely taking their toll. Tables and notepads and pens. The tables had notepads and pens. There were clocks, even a punch-in clock on the wall, complete with filled-out time cards. Chairs were scattered around it. There was even a small break room with an old static-filled television and long rotted-out food and drink on the counters. It was like one of those post-apocalypse movies where everything is left in the state of evacuation. As I walked the maze-like sub-basement hallways of the Mascots Only area, the sights just became more and more interesting. As I went further, desks and tables were knocked over, papers scattered and almost melted on the damp floor, and a large carpet of mold was slowly overtaking the real rotting crimson floor covering. Everything was just sort of squishy. Any wood disintegrated into mush when I applied even the least amount of force, and clothing items hanging on hooks in one of the rooms simply fell to the moist threads if I tried to unhook them. One thing that annoyed me was the light was becoming more sparse and unreliable as I went further into the dank, suffocating depths of this place. Eventually I reached a black and yellow striped door with the words Character Prep 1 stenciled on it. The door wouldn't open at first. I figured this is probably where the costumes were kept. I definitely wanted a photograph of the twisted, stinking mess. Try as I might, whatever angle or trick I tried, the door wouldn't budge. That is, until I gave up and started to walk away. That was when there was a slight popping sound and the door creaked open slowly. Inside the room was completely dark, pitch black. I used the camera flash to look for a light switch in the wall by the door, but there was nothing. As I made my search, I was jarred out of my sense of excitement by a loud electrical buzz. Rows of lights overhead suddenly flashed to life, flickering and fading in and out like the rest I had passed. It took a second for my eyes to adjust, and it seemed like the light was just going to keep getting brighter until all the bulbs exploded. But just when I thought it would reach that critical stage, the lights dimmed a bit and steadied. The room was exactly as I pictured it. Various Disney costumes hung on the walls, fully put together like strange cartoon cadavers hung from invisible nooses. There was an entire rack of loincloths and native clothes on the hangers toward the back. What I found odd and what I wanted to photograph right away was the Mickey Mouse costume at the center of the room. Unlike the other costumes, it was lying on its back in the center of the floor like a murder victim. The fur on the costume was rotted and shedding, creating bare patches. What was even odder, however, was the coloring of the costume. It was like a photo negative of the actual Mickey Mouse. Black where he should be and white where he should be black. His normally red overalls were light blue. The sight was off-putting enough that I actually put off photographing the thing until last. I took a picture of the costumes hanging on the walls, upward angles, downward angles, side shots to show an entire row of frozen, putrid cartoon faces, some with plastic eyes missing. Then I decided to stage a shot. Just one of the bedraggled character heads on the slick, grimy floor. I reached for the headpiece of a Donald Duck costume and carefully removed it so the thing wouldn't fall apart in my hands. As I looked into the face of the wide-eyed, moldering head, a loud clattering sound made me drunk with fright. I looked down at my feet, and up between my shoes was a human skull. It had fallen out of the mascot head and shattered into pieces at my feet. Only the empty face and lower jaw remained staring up at me. I dropped the duck head immediately as you'd expect to move for the door. As I stood in the doorway, I looked back at the skull on the floor. I had to take a picture of it, you know? I had to. For any number of reasons that may seem silly, but only if you don't think it through. I I'd need proof of what happened, especially if Disney was going to somehow make this go away. I had no doubt in my mind right from the start that even if it was just gross negligence, Disney was responsible for this. That's when Mickey, the photo negative opposite Mickey in the middle of the floor, started to get up. First sitting up and then climbing to its feet, the Mickey Mouse costume or whoever was inside of it stood there at the center of the room, its fake face just staring directly at me as I mumbled, "No," over and over and over. With shaking hands and a violently thrashing heart, the legs that had once again turned to jelly, I managed to lift the camera and aim it at the opposite creature now quietly sizing me up. The digital camera screen displayed only dead pixels in the shape of the thing. It was a perfect silhouette of the Mickey costume. As the camera moved in my unsteady hands, dead pixels spread, marring the screen wherever Mickey's outline moved to. Then the camera died, went black and quiet and broken. I raised my eyes once again to the Mickey Mouse costume. "Hey," it said in a hushed, perverted but perfectly executed Mickey Mouse voice. "What? Did my head come off?" It started to pull at its own head, working its clumsy glove-clad fingers around its neck, with clawing impatient movements similar to a wounded man trying to pull himself free of a predator's jaws. As it worked its digits into its neck, so much blood. So much thick, chunky yellow blood. I turned around as I heard a sickening tearing of cloth and flesh. I only cared about getting away. Above the doorway out of the room, I saw a final message cloud into the metal with bone and fingernails. "Abandoned by God." I never got the pictures out of the camera. I never wrote the blog entry about it. After I ran from that place, fled for my sanity, if not my very life, I knew why Disney didn't want anyone to know about this place. They didn't want anyone like me getting in. They didn't want anything like that getting out. And that was Abandoned by Disney by Slime Beast. Final thoughts? Kind of cheesy in my opinion, but amusing to read nonetheless. It's the sort of story you might tell a friend, but in its current form, I wouldn't publish it under my name. The Abandoned by God thing was kind of a cool line, though it seems kind of wasted on a story of this caliber, as if a last-ditch attempt to be spooky. The best time to use a line like that is in a story built up well and that leaves one wondering what in the world happened, not one which basically spells it out in gory details. Well, time for the next story. Will be much shorter in comparison to the last one, but in my opinion neither overstays their welcome nor lacks much for content. Story 3. Why I will never work security at Disney World again. For this one, I feel remiss enough to clarify, I did not write this one, nor did I ever work security for them. I thought maybe about being a security guard once, but I realized about halfway through the security guard course that I'm more interested in cybersecurity than security guarding. I hate confrontation with people, and in a food service setting as it is, so being a guard would basically take everything I dreaded about that and make it the sole focus. But that out of the way, I will take you through the actual story now. This is a 5-minute read, so very short, I won't be keeping you much longer. I work security at Disney World, the happiest place on earth. Typically, I wouldn't say where I worked, as obviously there's some pretty strict rules about things employees can put online, but I just don't think I can tell this properly without that context, and honestly, I think this may be it for me anyway with this job. I just can't see myself working there any longer. I've been with this company for 23 years. The first 20 years I worked in the park snapping shoplifters and rounding up people who were drinking too much for the heat. Occasionally there'd be a fight to break up, but people usually kept it pretty mild. The heat and walking there were too much for me in the last few years, so I asked to be transferred somewhere with air conditioning, and the company moved me to one of their resorts. While working, the conditions were 110% better as far as climate and comfort go. The guest issues were trickier, mainly domestics. I guess the expense and stress of vacation got to a lot of people. I'd be called by neighboring rooms because some mom and dad were yelling at each other. I tried to suggest they take a nap or go do separate activities for a bit. That would usually calm them down. But none of that is what I'm here for. I'm I gotta get this out while I still have time. 3 days ago, I got a call from management. Apparently, a couple of days before that, housekeeping had gotten into a room that should have been turned over that day. Turned over is when a guest leaves by about 11 a.m. The next guest checks in around 3 p.m. and all of the guests' items are still in the room. Housekeeping made a note of it and moved on, but during the next 2 days when they entered the room, everything was still there and untouched. I went to check it out, and sure enough, there was an empty room full of luggage, clothes, snacks, some toys, everything a family would need for a vacation. The manager had already looked up the previous reservation, and it was for a family. Dad, mom, 2 little kids. I tried to call the phone numbers they had given, but all I got was a voicemail. We were a bit stumped, so I made the call to a house that a housekeeper could clean the room and take the family's personal items to be held until we got in contact with someone. I went digging into the reservation more. The family had arrived 5 days before housekeeping discovered all their stuff. I found that the family had paid with a parking fee and their vehicle description was listed. A quick walk of the parking lots and I had easily located their vehicle. So that ruled out a car accident or them just deciding to leave all their stuff behind. Next I saw they bought a dining plan. This is when a guest prepays for all their food. They're given a certain number of credits to use for meals. This family had only used 3 credits, and the last one was 2 days after they checked in. It appeared that the day they arrived, they got here late and probably just stayed in the resort. The next day they'd used 2 credits at Epcot. The second park day they used just 1 credit at Magic Kingdom, and it was at breakfast time. Now at Disney we have something called Magic Bands. Magic Bands are worn by guests and act as a room key, park ticket, credit card, dining reservation payment, fast pass, the system used to bypass the lines, and more. It took some work, but I was finally able to look up this family's fast pass history. The day they went to the Magic Kingdom, they had breakfast at a restaurant in the park, rode a couple of rides, then went to the last ride. It's a Small World around 11 a.m., then nothing. Finally, it was time to bring in someone else on this. I called an old co-worker at the Magic Kingdom and asked him to pull security footage for It's a Small World at the time they wrote it, and I made my way over there. When I got there, my friend was very confused, almost distraught looking. He showed me what he found. There's usually a camera in the direction where the rides load and unload. Footage showed them scanning their bands to use fast passes for the ride and boarding the ride. Footage from the exit of the ride just showed the other people in their car exiting. They weren't there. Of course we thought the worst. Maybe one of the kids had fallen out and the mom and dad and other kid got off in the middle of the ride to help and they all got injured or killed or stuck in the machinery somewhere. So we shut down the ride in the middle of the damn day. Turned off that earworm music and turned up the lights. My buddy and I walked that ride 3 times before we called in help. Eventually there was close to 10 cast members searching, and we didn't find shit, except for 3 cell phones and a hat. I was right stumped. As I kept digging the past couple of days, I'm not sure who to tell what I found next to. I called the police and I suppose they're on their way, but the company has a way of covering up things like this. And I decided I can't live with myself if I don't put out some type of warning. I kept digging into the reservation over the last couple of days, and today I noticed they had purchased a memory maker. There are photographers all over the park and cameras in a lot of rides, and with the memory maker, the photos are all free. They automatically get added to the guest Disney account when the system knows the picture has been taken. The system always knows. Everyone's whereabouts are always known with Magic Bands. Well, I opened up their memory maker photo album and I swear there were 732 pictures. The first 30 or so are pretty normal. Epcot, a few rides in front of the castle, but the rest are all in It's a Small World. The rides only take 1 picture per go-around, so it appears as though the family's ridden this ride over 700 times. First picture was pretty normal. Everyone looked happy. It was a busy day and we had a full car of guests. The next one is rough to look at. The car is empty except for this little family. They look so darn confused. The next 10 or 15 I can see the dad getting angry, yelling. Mom is holding on to her 2 kids like her life depends on it. You can see the kids getting increasingly upset, crying. It goes on and on. After 50 or so, it looks like they're trying to get out. In one, the dad is missing. In another, they're all gone. Maybe like they've bailed early on the ride and tried to walk out. But in the very next one, they're all right back in the damn car. After 4:50 or so, I only see the mom and kids. It's just when I look closely I can see Dad. Maybe his body now slumped down one of their seats. Since about 6:75, it's just Mom and one kid. Another body in another seat. The Mom and kid aren't moving anymore. I think they're still alive, just damn near catatonic. Looking straight ahead, pale. And y'all, I swear on my life, the dolls are moving or something. In some of these pictures. You can tell they aren't where they should be. I even saw one with a doll in the car with his family. Can't look anymore, I'm gonna lose my lunch. Close the album, its file size has increased since I closed it. God, are there new pictures being added? I see on the security cameras that the local police department just arrived, so they'll take over soon. I wish I knew what was going on, but I also wish this damn thing had never landed in my lap. I don't think I'll ever be able to update this. After I talk to the police, I think I'm gonna walk out of here and never come back. I just wanted to get this out there before Disney feeds the media some lies to cover up the reasons behind why a whole family vanished. Because they didn't vanish. I know exactly where they are. And that was why I will never work security at Disney again. Final thoughts? It's honestly amazing, and I doubt I could have written it better myself. Bear in mind I've released 5 books to date, and I'm penning a 6th one, so I'm a little more familiar with the rigors of the creative process than the average reader who just wants to amuse themselves, and otherwise doesn't really do writing unless they have no choice. However, I must also admit I didn't go the traditional route, so apart from any personal standards and formatting requirements, I had the freedom to write them exactly as I wanted them to be, and decide where they went, whereas a traditional writer might have editors that, while they make it more polished than the writer would and allow the release to be faster, I feel it loses something in the personality that draws people to underground works like mine. It's just an opinion, and thus I have to confess I have my bias, as would someone who is traditionally published. Word choice and the way one puts together sentences can speak volumes about how they view the world. That is tough to discern when one is hung up about the rules of what not to write. That is not to say some traditional writers haven't found creative workarounds for the limits imposed on them. But I still wonder what their first drafts looked like, to understand the basic concept they had before they went and had it all redone. And were the changes made really worth the hassle? To what extent is it nitpicking to make or not make a change? Lastly, I may revisit some other Disney creepypastas if the mood or theme fits, but I kind of wanted to stick to the ones the collaboration was supposed to have so I can get back on track with the series. Will I do any more collaborations like this despite the outcome? Probably not for a series episode, as I kind of felt like I had talked myself out of continuing, as I would have between the overwhelming amount of work I was doing at the time and the urge to make more episodes waned with it. I don't blame anyone for that. I was already getting behind schedule trying to do 3 series simultaneously with 1 episode each per week. Even the creators I follow most and have much more polished videos than me only do 1 weekly series, and the other 2 are bi-weekly or monthly. On top of that, they hire editors to help them. I'm just an army of 1 here. So in short, I have only myself to blame for my lack of getting videos out. But because I know how I can be, I feel it is best for this channel that any collaboration be treated as bonus content or a bonus episode. That way, if we decide later it was not representative of what we wanted you all to see, I can continue just fine without having to redo an entire episode or skip it in the series, leaving you wondering what happened to it. Also, going forward, I will schedule episodes to always release on the appropriate day of the week, but it could be weeks or up to a month between episodes, as I still have other creative projects to do, such as a mystery novel, which I aim to release by the end of this year. I hope you all understand I have to pick and choose what to do in my limited time off, and these episodes are intended to be a free gift to fans of my writing, and those not yet in the loop who may be interested to see what I can do. All that aside, this has been Monster Mondays with me, your host, the Forsaken Scribe. Thank you for watching, and remember, Mom's not here, kids. Bye-bye.